got people live here. Welcome everybody to the Not a Rabbi podcast, the live edition, which is weird to do. I got to tell you, but I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I'd also like to thank the fine moderators of the Fifth Column Discord channel who have so wonderfully decided to sacrifice their channel to this. So I do appreciate it. What I generally, what the format's going to be is usually I talk about one specific subject, but since we are doing this live, I've got one question queued up from somebody. Any other questions that you have, feel free to put them into the episode discussion chat, which I'll try to manage at the same time, and we will do that at the same time. Everyone obviously knows that this is being recorded, so if you have you know, any objections to that, and don't want to even ask, if you want to ask the question live on air, you can certainly do that. If you don't, you could just post it in the episode discussion. I don't mind one way or another. Today is Sunday, January 27th, or no, not, man, bad, January 17th, and 2021, or 2021 as the kids like to say, and tomorrow, big day, inauguration day for the new president, Joe Biden. We'll leave a lot of the comments on that out, but, I was thinking about it yesterday, and the what to talk about for this podcast, and the idea of the inauguration hit me, and I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about the role of Orthodox Jews in U.S. government a little bit, because there have been several who have been Orthodox Jews and have been in high levels of U.S. government. You talk about people the likes of Joe Lieberman, who obviously was a vice presidential candidate, and it may have been even a vice president if it weren't for Florida in the year 2000. We're talking about someone like Jack Lew, who was the Treasury Secretary under President Obama. We talk about somebody who, like a Dov Zakheim, who is probably not as well known as the other two, and he was actually somebody that worked in the State Department at a very high level. He was a deputy secretary, I forget exactly in what area of the State Department, during the Bush 43 administration. And then you have someone who I believe the current ambassador for at least another day, the current ambassador to Israel, whose name I forget, who is, I believe, also an Orthodox Jew, and without saying, the current president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his wife, who are both Orthodox Jews as well. Of course, we have the conspiracy theorists who say that, of course, they are not, Jews are not someone who are not, there's this dual loyalty, which has always been around, and this has been a concept that has happened. Hey, Menard, if you could do me a favor and just mute, because I'm hearing some background myself. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I hate to mute anybody, but yeah. Anyhow, so this is I think that this really belies the concept of dual loyalty, because these are people that have been Orthodox. We've got several of them from one party, the Democrats. We've got several of them from the other party, the Republicans, and they won't agree on stuff, and you're going to have them disagreeing, and they're not going to have this one overall idea of just just letting doing it for Israel to just to win or anything like that. And this is, like I said, this is the concept of dual loyalty is not new. It is thousands of years old, if not hundreds of years old, if not thousands of years old. But I thought it was an interesting thing to just think about, and look at some of the people, and you even have, let's say, non-religious Jews who have been in high places of power, um, such as the oh who there's a article in Commentary magazine in this month's issue of Commentary magazine, um, by and somebody who's somebody the person who wrote it. I'm gonna bring it up right now. uh, Commentary magazine. The person who wrote it was talking about how there is one member of the cabinet, I believe, for Biden, who is really going ahead, who actually was, whose grandfather, I believe it was someone who was a very famous Yiddish writer. And obviously, that is, I guess they're somewhat Jewish still at this point. I'm not sure exactly how much they actually relate to Judaism, but I'll have to look that up and put that into the show notes for later. But it's just something that's interesting how you see that there have always been, Jews in United States government. There have always been, and if you take a look at the time of going back to as long as the Spanish Inquisition, or before that, there were many, uh, or not many, but there were lots of Jews that were in high positions in the governments, and these are talking about with Christian kings or with Muslim leaders. So it's an interesting thing there. Anybody want to have any thoughts on that, or want to chime in on that? Go ahead, Ren.
Yes, sure. Actually, I'm actually kind of curious. I don't know how much you know of the history, and I don't as well, but how much the difference would be in different countries depending on whether they had an emphasis on separation of church and state between those that have like a state religion, and how they treat questions of dual loyalty. You'd think it would make it easier, but I don't know if that history actually bears that out. If, like in countries like the United States, where there is a strong emphasis on separation of church and state versus other countries.
That's a great point. But first of all, let me just get a clarification. Are you talking on a historical basis, or are you talking more on a more modern basis?
I don't know, because I think a lot of that question comes up much more modern as well. Like it hasn't even been 100 years in the U.S. since we've had our first Catholic president, since we've had a lot of people have opened different faiths in government.
Well, in fact, isn't this the second Catholic president that we're having? Biden being the second Catholic president, if I'm not mistaken, after Kennedy.
I think you're correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. But the concept of, and in fact, just as a total aside, there was a whole lot of questions of dual loyalty thrown at Kennedy as well, during his candidacy and running. Is he going to listen to the Pope, or is he going to listen to the American law? This was something that happened. Um, but I think, with vis-a-vis Jews, this has been something that even when they were in the higher echelons of government, when you're talking about um, under the King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain, and other, even Suleiman the Magnificent, with Maimonides being his doctor, and somebody that he relied upon for information. This is something, that has always been asked about and questioned, and it has always been in something in the background. And just to get biblical for a second, you actually kind of see this with the opening of Exodus, the first chapter of Exodus, where Pharaoh, I always get my transliterations mixed up, but Pharaoh says, hey, we got to deal with these guys because they're like a fifth column. Hey, what a coincidence! We're talking about the fifth column in the fifth column Discord. Great, but they're going to be like a fifth column, and they're going to rise up and they're going to take over the country. And this, so we see this, and this again, if you follow the story that happened in Genesis, Joseph had rose up to be the second in command to Pharaoh, and he was the guy that was making all the decisions until he died. So this is something that you could even say has goes back all the way to biblical times, and I don't think it necessarily makes a difference whether or not there's a separation between church and state, or if there is a state religion, because it's worked both ways. So, Ren, I think that's a long-winded answer to your question.
No, that's excellent. I just was, yeah, curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. Anybody else wanna have any questions about that, or wanna chime in about that? Yeah, so it's just a very it's a very interesting thing, and in a lot of ways it's very obviously it's very disheartening to hear these issues of loyalty and dual loyalty basically coming up and consistently coming up. And I obviously wish it wouldn't happen, and but that is the lot in life, as they say. Um, that is definitely it. I thought I would have more to say. I thought it would take longer, but it never does take as long as you think it would take. Hey, so let's get to a question that was asked, and let's see if there's any questions in the chat before I take a look. Oop, maybe. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. Yes, thank you, and thank you very much. Late stage ageism. Yes, lots of stuff going on. Yeah, there's a lot of that. It's in terms of Biden not being a real Catholic. These were a lot of the things that were also even talked about with regard to Kennedy. So these are not new accusations that are going on. And I will definitely put those links in the show notes. Um, the only reason I said it was commentary is I happened to be listening to the commentary podcast on Friday, and they mentioned that somebody has an article with regard to that as well. So that's why I wanted to bring that. I mentioned it in commentary. Yes, thank you very much. Blinken. Yes, Blinken. How could I not forgotten that name? Yes, and Brett, you're right. Romney does get the same thing with regard to Mormonism as well, and it's interesting how um, it's interesting how somebody who is religious, no matter what, and you'll see that you see this with Christians as well, where they come into the country, or they not come into the country, they come into government, and people will go ahead and just say, hey, you're not going to do things. Take a look at Amy Coney Barrett, for example, right? Which is also, I think, a very good example. She was much maligned for her uh, religious beliefs. If I am not mistaken, Senator Feinstein said to her when she was being talk when she was being her first Senate appointment, not appointment, but words escape me. Word things, not good. Um, when she was going for her first bench appointment as a federal judge, Feinstein said, I believe something, and Brett, I'm sure you will correct me, said something along the lines of your the dogma lives within you, or something along those lines, and that set off a huge confirmation. Yes, thank you very much. Um, the dogma lives loudly within you. Exactly, and these are always consistent problems with um, when you are religious and you're serving in government, where the people that are against you, and as you see here, it doesn't matter whether or not you're from the left or from the right, they're going to attack your religiosity, and it's an interesting thing. I just I don't it just I didn't get probably enough time ruminate on it and have more interesting points about it. But it's definitely something to talk about. And I think, you know, going forward, what I mean, obviously, what I would like to see is I would like to see something like that go away, because, as Ren mentioned, there is a separation between church and state, and most people, even myself included, listen, I have my own personal beliefs on things, but if I were ever to be in a position of political decision making, I could not allow those types of issues to go ahead and affect my thinking with regard to the, to the what the law should be. So there you have it with that. Let me get back into the chat here. Let's see if there's anything else going on. Oops, somebody. Okay, so Swamp Ting says, have you noticed any specific ways in which the people you mentioned incorporated their faith in their approach governing, or brought it to a public platform? Interesting. I will tell you, and this might answer the question, it might not, but I've heard Dov Zakheim speak, and he is actually someone who is really uses uh, Nehemiah. I'm not sure what the English way to say that would be. Nehemiah, maybe? I don't know. But he uses Nehemiah as a guide to how he tried to bridge the religiosity with um, with being in the public sphere, where he actually was first. If you take a look in the book of Nehemiah, which is maybe not part of part of part of Ezra, in the in the Jewish canon, it's been subsumed into the book of Ezra. It's been taken out of the book of Ezra. There's there are reasons as to why, which is a longer discussion. But it is he was actually just a statesman. He was a political person that was put there by Cyrus, if I am not mistaken. I have to double check. I'm doing things off the top of my head, but I believe it was Cyrus, and was sent to Jerusalem to make sure that things went as they should be going. So it was, it's I think that he is somebody that uses that. um, I don't know if anybody really has done that. We know that people get accused of that, but I don't know if there's been any definitive proof, one way or another, that they are going to be that they're going to be, they do that. They put that in. But I do think that it depends on what side of the aisle you are on, in a way as well, because if you're going to be a Republican, you're going to be more someone that is going to be pro-life. Maybe not to the extreme of, just at conception. Maybe, have a little bit more wiggle room, and those things. So I'm not sure, but it is a very, very good question, though, Swampy. Thank you very much. Anyone else got anything that they want to bring up? All right, so let's get to a question here that was asked, and I think it's really a good question. Once again, Swamp Ting asks this. He asked this earlier, and he said, "Is there any figure in Judaism recently who's played a role similar to Jordan Peterson? Not related to all of the culture war baggage, but just in the sense of trying to make some of the Christian stories, and maybe to a smaller degree rituals, relevant to younger generations?" That is a very interesting question, and I would actually say there are a couple of people that are really doing that these days, a lot. Somebody whom I listen to often is by the name of Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg, who has a website, rabbiephremgoldberg.com. I believe he is the senior rabbi of the Boca Raton Synagogue, and he really tries to bring meaning to the rites that are done to more modern people. I think that someone else that has said this was the former dean of Yeshiva University, who Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik, of blessed memory, and he has been quoted as saying that we need to take the old lady of religion and dress her up in new clothing. So this is something that really is a generational type of thing, I would say. My own personal feeling is any educator should be doing this with their students. Any Jewish educator should be doing this with their students. And I speak as somebody who does substitute in Judaic studies from time to time when the need arises. And I try to do this with my kids, with my students. I was a couple of weeks ago teaching the eighth grade in a school, in my school that I teach at in the morning, and I was trying to teach them reasons behind what they do, or let's say the main prayer that we say 3 times a day, the Amidah, which is basically when we have a one-to-one conversation with God. We are able to have this 3 times a day. I was trying to give them some meaning behind it in terms of just the words and how the words they can take these words and use them and understand them as their own. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, who just died a couple of months ago, was also somebody that really tried to go ahead and make the ancient modern, for lack of a better word. He was brilliant at it. I mean, it helps that he was a philosophy professor, and got into the rabbinate at a very early age. I mean, very late age, more than a lot of other people do. But he was a great thinker, and there are others that do this as well, I'm sure. But they are people. Those are some of them that really come to mind to go ahead and try to make the rituals and the rites more relevant to the younger generation, because when it comes to Judaism, that is really something that is very important, because Judaism's all about that consistent going down from generation to generation, where you are passing these things on to to the next generation, and that continuation is something that is extremely important in Judaism. It's, if that is one of the reasons that we have on Passover, we have the Passover Seder, and we have the youngest kids and all the kids ask these questions, and to have a dialogue with your children to explain to them, and in modern terms, what this means and why this is so important. So that is a great question, and Swamp Thing. Hopefully, I was able to answer that question somewhat properly. Of course, as I say, I am not a rabbi, so I am. It's just one man's opinion with a microphone, but I do think that this is something that does happen, and is important for all of us. For Jews, to continue its continuity. It's extremely important. Any other questions? Anything else we want to talk about? Sholem. Oh, excellent question. Late stage. Excellent question. Dovetailing off of the Jordan B. Peterson, do you think Gershom Scholem played a similar role, or is his stuff too esoteric? Scholem is an interesting character. I have not read some of his stuff. I've actually read some of his adjacent to some of his stuff, actually, where, and he is I would say he is somebody that was, maybe, I mean, I have not read a lot of his stuff, and ironically enough, my dad has read his stuff more than I have read his stuff. But my dad deals in the esoteric a lot more than I do, so which, and that explains why he does that. He could actually read and understand Umberto Eco, where I just get through one line and scratch my head and wonder what's going on. So that, but I would say to a degree, yes. But he deals a lot more with the Kabbalistic types aspects of things, and he does take it down and bring it to a little bit more of a modern approach. I would say somebody else that does that, maybe even dovetailing off of Sholem, would be Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan of blessed memory, who he has a couple of books on Jewish meditation. He has an interesting book on Kabbalah as well, which are available if you just go to Amazon. You could do a search for them. I have a book of his on Jewish meditation, and he goes ahead and does and he works with these types of things. So I would say that yeah, Sholem does do some of it, but it's a little bit, yeah, it is a little bit more esoteric. And I mean, personally, I'm more of a practical guy, but that is what it is. But like I said, I'm adjacent to the esoteric stuff, because when I have talks with my dad about theology and other things, he can get very, very deep in the weeds on the esoteric stuff, which is, if nobody knows my dad here, but if you knew my dad, you would definitely totally understand. Anything else you guys want to discuss? Let's see here. Maybe a future guest. My dad, totally. I would be totally down with having my dad on the show. I would. He would be very interesting to have. Yes, I totally agree. He's a very interesting man, my dad, who, when he was going into high school, he decided that he wanted to be a Catholic priest, because, well, my father was not Jewish, and he went ahead and went to a seminary in Indiana for high school for this. And he also then totally, obviously, since he married my mom, he didn't go ahead and follow through on that. But he's always been very spiritual of a person, so he might be an interesting person to have on the show. I would love to do that. I'll have to work that out with him, but see what it is. So that is, I would love to have him on, because I think it would be a great some great conversations to be had with him. And and maybe we could get him to do some live performances, because he's also writes his own songs and performs folk music. So, which I did not get any of the musical genes as at all. They skipped a generation. My daughter is actually very good at music and playing music. She's a good guitar player, if I do say so myself, and have a little bit of enjoyment out of that, listening to her play when she practices. But yeah, that's I don't know. Anything else you guys wanna talk about? Any comments on the voice side? Right, looks like Logan just said something here. If it's not off topic, do you think Trump's lack of religiosity in comparison to most recent presidents contributes to him being uniquely bad? And then the follow-up question to that is, what do you think of Jared and Ivanka playing that surrogate role with emphasis on Judaism? Well, I do think that that Trump's lack of religiosity does play into it to some degree. And the reason I feel that way is that, and everyone may disagree with me on this point, but it helps when you have a moral center. When an individual has a moral center, those sorts of decisions. Bless you. Those sorts of decisions that or moral decisions, you're going to have a certain approach that you're going to consistently take. And this is not something, as we know very well, and if you've read any of the books that have come out about Trump and the Trump administration, it has been to make it has been a production with lots of fecal matter. And so I think that having that moral center makes a really big difference. I mean, another president that I don't think had such a strong moral center, would have been President Clinton. I would say did not have such a strong moral center, and I think we can all probably agree on that to some degree. He was an excellent politician, don't get me wrong, but his moral center probably wasn't all there as well. What do I think? What do I think of Jared and Ivanka playing that surrogate role with the emphasis on Judaism? I don't know if necessarily they did. They tried to keep their, aside from the Abrahamic Accords, which Jared really got the ball rolling with, and and in my personal opinion, did a very good job with. That really was where his Judaism, I think, played a role to make sure that there was working with Israel, and also the fact that they moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem is also something that they was something that they did. So I think between those two things, it was though that's what it was, and was it to save Trump's image? Of course, Wino Kelly. That of course it was. I mean, it had to be part of that to save his image. But I think that his image got severely tarnished, if to put it mildly, with what went on with the events of January 6th. So I don't think that it's anything that's going to, and that's not going to be anything that probably changes anytime soon. But those great questions, great. But if there isn't anything else, I think we could, Kelly, okay, thank you. If there's nothing else, if nobody else wants to say anything, thank you all. You've been a wonderful audience. And don't forget to tip your food server and try the veal. It is, or actually, since this is not a rabbi podcast, you can try the pastrami. It's very good. And thank you very much, all of you, for coming and listening to this. It's been a blast. Logan, I'll send you my email address to Venmo me later. But thank you. But you guys have been great, and I'd love to do this again. We'll do this again another time. Thanks a lot. And by the way, I am Aaron Benedict, and I am not a rabbi.